What's up, you guys? Today we get to start back on our NATT project for our Nissan 300ZX. So this is actually an NA high compression motor that we put all supporting mods from a twin turbo to make all the boost and make some jam. So we just bought a twin turbo chassis, ended up having low compression over here in this engine. So now, before we get this ready and drop it back in the car we took this from, we're actually going to put it in my Slicktop so we can verify it works 100%, everything's correct, compression's good, it runs good, before we pull the trigger and drop it in our DN1 twin turbo. We have a couple things to do to that chassis before we actually drop it in, so I would like to take care of those and clean the whole bay and get everything done while it's easy to do so. Because let's be honest, if your engine's in the car, you have no room to do anything. So last video, we actually got everything put in the chassis. Got our blow off valve. Hey, what's up, Spider? Got our oil cooler, intake system, and our intercooler pipes. We also went through our wiring harness in, and pretty much now we're ready to drop the motor. In the last video, we prepared everything in the chassis to be able to drop it, and then we prepared everything here on the engine to be able to drop it. With the exception of our idle stuff here, a couple hoses, and some hardware for our downpipes. We actually just got all those parts in, or at least stuff to use for this situation. So we're gonna finish buttoning this up and we're gonna drop it in the car today. The main reason we're dropping it in this Slicktop, not only to make sure it works, is we're actually gonna be driving this down to the body shop to get some rear collision damage fixed. Now, let's get to work on our Z. So I actually decided against these downpipes down here, and we're just gonna run these for now. Because I got to thinking, the Greddy is the exhaust that sounds really good with this setup. If I can't put the Greddy on because the car is wrecked, I'm not going to go through all this extra hassle. Plus the nightmare of taking the hardware off when I did remove it from that engine. I think we'll just pass for now. We'll keep these TT JDM downpipes, and we've actually got everything we need to put it together. Nissan nut, got some more of them hardened bolts for the top. An idle air hose with the idle air attachment to go right up here, which that'll take a little finagling since, you know, we have this J30 plenum. We could just trim this off, to be honest. But last but not least, we have our section of everything back here that we need. We're going to change this hose because it kinks and it's actually a straight hose. Or it can just tear the whole way it goes on. Dang it, I should have known better. And I guess now we're going to go look for some silicone hoses. Well, we just checked our box of all of our hoses, couple silicones, and we got lucky. Looks like we found what we're looking for. Didn't see any of these, but I'm about positive I've got one on a plenum. Looks about right. Got that all secured. Two 10mm bolts, and we actually put this hard line on because it's actually a spacer to separate it and put it in the right position. If not, you can put a couple washers back there and it'll work just fine. You'll just clean up this mount for your O2 and your VTC. We did finagle this on. This was something else. I don't know if this fitting's cocked a little bit off or what, but I've never had this hard pipe over here so hard to fit. Well, that officially puts us onto our downpipes. So we have one bolt started over here. So let's put another 3 bolts in the top of both sides. These nice hardened bolts. Now let's thread our nuts on. This one's a little tricky to get to. It's like on the bottom of the downpipe. Like that. Now that both of our downpipes are fully bolted up, it's time that we take our engine and place it in the car. So we've got like our coolant overflow, wiring harness, throttle cable, all pulled over here out the way, where our wiring harness is right up against the strut tower. Cylinder 4 and 6 coil packs and your idle air stuff. I always tuck it between your brake booster and master. Booster hose is tucked back, and so is our wiring harness for the rest of the engine over here. We were going to go crazy and clean everything, but I'm really not finding it necessary right now, especially when everything's coming out soon so we can fix our rack and start powder coating everything. Let's start the process. So I do recommend you put like 2x4s, 2x6s, something underneath your wheels to raise the car a little bit. Because if not, when you drop your engine in, it'll actually sag enough to get caught on your tension rod brake air guides and sometimes your actual subframe itself. So go ahead and put those under your wheels. And the way when I install an engine, I like to look, and all I'm doing is trying to just get it centered, avoid the clutch from scraping the firewall, and keeping the downpipes from hitting your AC if you have it or grabbing your wiring harness back here. And once we can get it low enough, all we are looking for is our stud right here on our engine mount and trying to poke it in down here on these two. So let's begin the fun part. So now here, once you get it to this point, you also want to make sure your intercooler piping doesn't catch. Don't worry about that fan. So you can see how close everything's going to be getting back here. Our downpipes are already pretty close to the wiring harness. As you keep inching it down, just keep walking around the car, wiggling it, and checking for clearance. Just make sure you don't tear nothing up. This is so crammed in. We are clearing the wiring harness now. We managed to drop that down, so now we just need to get it to where we can kind of get these into place. So we've been gradually moving it down. Intercooler pipes have cleared. We're off the wiring harness. It's free falling and it's not getting hurt from the downpipes. Now we're at the point we can start feeding these accordion hoses down and trying to get them put on our lower intake pipes under the headlight. Also, it's a good time to take your alternator to transmission harness, snake it. I like to bring it behind the power steering pump, or power steering reservoir, sorry. Then run it straight down here. We're gonna wait to button that up before the engine is actually mounted. But now I recommend getting your power steering on. You can get your J-hose right now, but before you put your J-hose on, snake this fitting up, your banjo bolt or banjo fitting. Get it into place. Once your banjo fitting's on, put your J-hose on with your 8mm hose clamp, then drop the car down and get the engine mounts and the subframe. Now we're pretty much clearing everything. We're not gonna get hung up. Just keep pulling back on your intercooler pipes until they get to where they're just not gonna get hung up anymore. I don't recommend putting these on tight until you get the transmission in, but this will be the first thing that you do up here on the top once the engine is actually set into place. Just my recommendation, makes it easier to get to. So when I said not to hook these up, all I meant is to not tighten them, because the engine's actually going to need to tilt back, and if this is hooked up to this, it won't tilt back enough for you to be able to get the trans on the rear of the engine. Once your mount is on the subframe, there's a little bit of give on the mount, so you can actually snake it around and move it, and once you can get it to drop in that slot, it's set. Then you can focus on your other side. Usually it'll be kind of teetered and you got to focus one before you can do the other one. So let's get the other one and drop this thing down the rest of the way. Sitting in here on our own weight now. I don't like to let it down all the way. I will grab like a ratchet strap and hook it up to this coolant pipe. Sorry, I actually hook it up here to the plenum, and I like to ratchet strap it up so that way we can tilt the engine up, and now we have all the room in the world that we need to put these heater core pipes on, or hoses I should say. And once the strap will hold it, we can actually let it down all the way and relieve the hoist and get a little bit more access to work over here. Alrighty, so we officially have the car outside. Honestly, our next step is to jack the thing up, get it on blocks, use jack stands, whichever you prefer, whatever you feel more comfortable with. We're just going to raise the thing up so we can get room to install a transmission. I'm ready to get this thing done. We got it all up on blocks just in time to run out of daylight. We're going to go ahead and wait till first thing in the morning, come out here, and we should be able to knock everything out tomorrow. Until tomorrow. So it's the next morning. We got out here bright and early so we could start and get this done. And I just heard a bunch of thunder. Super dark this way, but look at these clouds. What the heck? That must be the storm front itself. It's pretty cool. But that means we got to get this thing done. I at least want to get my transmission in before all this hits, so that way when we come back out, it's all easy peasy. Thank goodness I already put it out here. Got it all set up and ready. Do this at your own discretion, however you prefer. I got this little mat so I can roll everything in concrete, not concrete, in gravel. Duh. All right, you guys, we're actually gonna abort mission. It's not looking too good right now. I need to get this mat on top of our convertible for backup protection and to get this transmission out from under this. We'll be back when it comes time. All right, so we're back, and it looks like we've done something wrong, and I honestly should have known better because I've done this multiple times before. We actually have got our transmission plate on backwards. The way that you can tell is there's no bolt here or bolt hole, and there's not one up here. Top two line up, and then usually that confuses you because you're looking at it at the top two. So I honestly usually only use 4 bolts. So since we have 4 bolts and all this is coming out very soon, we just needed to drive an hour away. 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. We're just going to throw these on and make it happen. I like to raise it from right here in the middle where the gearbox meets together, and as I lift it, I just balance it to keep it in place and try to get it as even up here to the clutch as possible. So let's get this thing lifted up. Now we're lifted up almost there. Here you do the little solo foot jack method. You lift your trans as you slide it up, and you try to point your input shaft of your trans into the clutch. Once you get it high enough and can get it started in the clutch, there we go. Oh, looks like we got almost the right height on it. So the way that you get this in the rest of the way, a lot of people struggle when they get this far. So you can look around and you want it to be flush with the flywheel, almost like this, all the way around. So we can see the flywheel's poking out at the top and the back. So let's raise it a little bit more where we can get it as flush as possible, so you're going in as straight as possible. And wiggle your transmission into place. It's seriously as easy as that. Now let's put our 4 bolts in and get to mounting this on the trans mount. Now before we put the trans up and bolt in the trans mount, it's a best time to go ahead and hook up your trans wiring. It's pretty hard to mess this up. You've got your 2-wire gray oval connector, you've got a square black connector that's a 2-wire, and you've got this little red 2-wire connector as well. Hook them up and then pin your trans wiring up here with these bendable brackets to secure it to the top of the trans. And if you have any issues lining this up, loosen your trans mount down here to 12 mils once you lift it up here, and it'll give you a little bit more room for adjustment to be able to get your bolts threaded in. Sometimes with new mounts or with everything in here being so crammed, it can push it to one side. Now it does make it a little easier when you do finger tighten these first. Don't just try to, torque it in because you think that the head's biting a little bit. Get one started. Now you can just ensure that you don't cross thread it and don't damage your threads, because that'll just make for a more annoying job the next time all this has to come out, especially if you just send it in. Torque her up and then we're all good to go, all on its own. So personally, I would much rather put these things in as a whole assembly like this, so you don't have to fight the whole underside and upper side when you're only on one side. So pretty much what I do here is I'll angle the shifter back while I poke it up, and then I'll fish these forks right here up and over to where I can bolt them in, keep it in place, and then I'll secure it right here to the shift linkage. So the clearance is tight with everything in place, but you definitely can still do it as we just did. So let's put all of our hardware in and finish it up. Now that the shifter linkage is hooked up, may as well pull this out and let's get our drive shaft in. So since I have a 1-piece drive shaft and I leave my catbacks hooked up, I'm going to fish it in here through the side to get it to go back here. And I'm going to bend the exhaust down and put it between the sway bar and the exhaust to get clearance to fit the yoke in the trans. Then I'll slide it up, I'll spin it accordingly in neutral, and get the rear diff flange bolts to line up. Now for the rear end. Spider graveyard up in here. Bolt comes from the drive shaft side. Your lock washer and nut go on the back by the diff. Ratcheting wrench is going to be your best friend here. So for now, drive shaft's in. We're actually calling it quits with the bottom side of the car. That's because all we have left down there, test pipes, starter, slave cylinder, engine mount nuts. Sorry, there's literally 4 things left, so we're not too stressed about that. Let's move on, or we can finish bringing this car together. We did put this in already. We've got our heater core stuff back here, and we managed to save our firewall from it tilting backwards. Before you start anything, to get these under your headlight accordion hoses mated together. Because now that everything's officially pushed up and mounted where it's going to be, I'll snug it up, and this will eliminate one thing off the list. And honestly, now that we will have these done, we will have plenty of access to do anything else, because the hard to reach stuff is now officially done. If you did all them deletes, don't forget to cap these little ports right below your throttle bodies. If not, this is a very easy thing to forget and have a boost leak test over. Now let's hook up our oil cooler lines. This elbow at a 90-degree angle actually goes to your oil pan, and the one that right here is up and down goes to your oil tree. So in other words, this upper hose goes to your oil pan and the lower hose goes to your oil tree. Get appropriate hose clamps. I don't like using these worm gear style, but unfortunately it is the only thing that I have right now. We're gonna use what we got. So we now got both of those lines hooked up, and I just realized something very crucial. I actually don't have the adapter piece for your radiator. Twin turbos are actually kind of like right over the tension rod brackets, so I'm kind of screwed. I do have one, but it's in my drift car back here. And I'm not sure if I want to play the game of taking stuff off of other cars to make another car work, because then I hinder another car unusable. Dang, that sucks. That means I gotta order that tonight. I totally forgot. I guess we can't put the radiator or anything cooling related in today. I guess let's move on to the wiring harness, because we don't have much of a choice really. We're going to show you guys where everything goes and kind of where you know where to expect each of them connectors to be on your harness. So when it comes to putting a Z32 together, especially if you bought it not put together, a wiring harness can be pretty tricky and not really that self-explanatory to know where everything goes. So here on your main harness, you have like a little second section. This actually goes over by your battery. This middle section here, it just kind of naturally lays out. This will go under your balance tube for everything up here. We also have this harness back here towards cylinder 6. We've got another little section of connectors right over here. These will be TPS related. And then you have your final one that comes up here and comes under and over to your CAS, your coolant pipes, and your PTU right here. You can actually run this harness over here underneath your accordion pipe. That's what I'm about to do to reroute it, but single spade, coolant temp, this is your gauge sensor. This yellow connector is your coolant temp sensor that goes to your ECU. Now we also have both of these PTU plugs. So we're just gonna route this stuff in its general area. Now let's move on back here to this corner. So on this section of the harness, you'll have one little kind of standoff connector. That's actually your cylinder 5. You also have this little ground poking off back here. That will go right here on your plenum. I've never actually had a twin turbo apart. I'm about positive that this right here is your AIV and this would be your EGR connector. So there would be a little module back here that this would plug into. This 3-wire plug goes to your O2 sensor. And this 2-wire would go to your VTC solenoid, which technically should be long, but this has 2 shorts on it. It should come up here to this little bracket on the side of your plenum. And this black square plug is actually for your stock boost solenoids that'll be on your bracket bolted right here and go down bolted to your block, or your head, sorry, not your block. So this side is officially all put together now. And we may as well start here with this. So this back little corner, the very first one, will be your cylinder 5 fuel injector. Now this one, you see they kind of just want to go together. Whenever they're bunched together, they will go to the same cylinder if they're coming out of the same spot. Like this, goes right up here to cylinder 1. Your driver's side cylinder 2 will always have 3 because you actually have a fuel temp spade right here. This fuel injector goes here. You'll actually get the coil pack connector and the final fuel injector from the other harness over there. Sorry, not the final fuel injector. Final fuel injector is right here. So this little section of 3 is your NOx sensor, number 6 injector, and your auxiliary air control, which then goes right here. NOx sensor, auxiliary air, we do need to get a clip for that, and number 6 injector. Now we're officially only left with the wiring harness back in this corner. Before we start back here, I'll actually pay a little homage over here. So this is still connected. I'm pretty sure this is the PRVR. If this isn't and this is the AIV, your PRVR is the black solenoid back there. And this is your driver boost solenoid, same kind of square plug. You also have these 2 TPS plugs, 2 3-wire oval plugs, and then you have your hard idle switch. So there will be a little section of 3 that are taped together if you have a 94 to 96. So if you have an early style harness, you won't have this black plug, but this is actually for your EGR temp sensor here in the back. The 2 and 3 pin plugs that are connected here together on their own wiring harness are actually your O2 sensor and your VTC, which should be mounted right up here. As far as your other 3 pin that is all by itself, that is actually cylinder 6 coil pack. the one that's a little bit longer, that is cylinder 5 coil pack, you have these 2 grounds right here. These both go right here. As far as your yellow and blue connector goes, those are color coordinated, and right back here, your idle air control. Technically your fast idle, which is your blue connector here, and then the black connector right here actually goes to the yellow, and that is your idle air connector. Oh yeah, and you can also take your brake booster hose and connect it right here to your plenum. We're now officially fully hooked up. Wiring harness is all done, and we'll just lay that across now. We're not going to get to the throttle cable just yet. We do need to get a fuel system, at least a fuel filter, bracket, and some soft lines to go over here. But first we actually need to find a good candidate for a stock fuel rail, pressure regulator, and dampener. Usually you would run an adjustable fuel pressure regulator, so you can adjust it to base fuel pressure, which is I think 43.5 psi. Once you get it there, then your boost will raise 1 psi per manifold pressure, so every pound of boost you will produce 1 extra pound of fuel pressure. We don't have one on hand, so we're actually going to use a stock setup with brand new hoses. It's not ideal, but it will work. We will be putting a Walbro 485, but usually just depending on your fuel pump, that's kind of how you gauge what you need to use. Probably anything under like a 350 you can get away with stock stuff. I've got away with stock stuff on this application before. That's why we're trusting to do it again. It's nice seeing everything come together though. So honestly, we're pretty much nearing the finish line. We've got 2 intake pipes per side. Once we put these into place, that'll really solidify where our intake piping will sit. It'll kind of squish it back and give us room for our radiator. However, I'm not too crazy about putting these on just yet, mainly for the reason of me wanting to have clearance to fit the radiator in here once we get our little adapter plate, or if I can find the right stuff at Lowe's, I can show you guys a cheaper alternative if you have an aftermarket radiator. But honestly, for now, since we're left with getting our caps to block off our OEM recirc spots to run these blow-off valves, we need a longer silicone hose to route our blow-off valve. I need that bar so we can get our coolant system finished off. I need to go to the store and get a fuel filter so we can finish and well, technically start and finish the fuel system. We actually need to find a clutch master, which I actually have brand new master and slave. They're not OEM, so I can throw them in at least to use in the meantime. But yeah, we have to wire our fuel pump, we have to wire in a fuel pump, and we have to siphon the tank. I know, it's all unfortunate. But I honestly think we're going to wrap up the video here because we're at a good stopping point. The rain's about to pick up again, and it is honestly getting super humid out here. I'd rather get ahead. I'm already a day late on this video, and I need to get it out for you guys. I'm sorry I've been coming out every 4 days instead of 3. We're trying to get caught back up on all that. And we're going to try to get back to uploading every 3 days. Hopefully we can hustle right and get on to uploading every 2 days. That is something I would like to try to accomplish by the end of this year. Us staying busy right now is just boiling up to that point. Also, I didn't want to put too much in this video because I want you guys to be able to kind of walk along. I don't want to just cram everything in and make it so rushed and maybe not as detailed. I want you guys to not really have to ask questions. I want you to be comfortable to jump in, do it yourself, and to be able to problem solve and figure it out. Because let's be real, if I can do this, you guys can do it too. I'm just a guy that has a passion for a car. I don't have skills, just passion. But with that being said, I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, don't forget to drop a like below and subscribe to stay tuned for more content, and we will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.